is not showing the notification, but hello and welcome to part 2 of my revised narration of the NES Godzilla Creepypasta. There we go. But yeah, in the last part we started off and we got to the end of Dementia. I think it was Dementia. Right? Wasn't it? Damn it. Okay. I have something I have to say that really pisses me off, and this isn't just for the laptop I have. This could be for any old computer or anything that you use to browse the web. Don't you just hate it when you're about to tap or click on something and then the web page loads up, so just as you click the thing that you want to click, instead you accidentally click like a link to the main page for the website? I don't get that, seriously. Anyway, yeah, it was Dementia that we last left off on. Or really, we finished that up, so now we're on Entropy, which is entering the second half of the Creepypasta. So, yeah. I mean, second half plus the epilogue, but, you know. Anywho. Alright. So. Oh, there's two parts to Entropy, but we're going to start off on part 1, obviously. Also, I have my NES Classic Edition in front of me to sort of more emulate the experience, sort of, if that makes sense, I guess. Yeah. Again, camera is not on, and I will try my best to stay focused on the main topic. If I ever deviate, it's either because I have to explain something in detail because I won't be able to show it like I did in my first rendition of my reading of this story, or it might be because of the fact that I have to go do something or something of that sort. But without further ado, let's do this. In the original game, the sixth world was Pluto. Ironically, despite being the smallest planet, Pluto was the largest and most diverse in the world in the game. Entropy had a different layout, but was similarly huge and diverse. The board music was played by a violin instrument, a melody that started off sounding mournful, and then it gets rather, I guess I would call it, distorted. It made me feel depressed and unnerved. Not something I would want to hear when trying to sleep. Strangely, none of the levels from the previous worlds were present here. Instead, there were 8 brand new icons. The bosses this time were Megalon, Batra, and Mechagodzilla. As usual, the first thing I did was go to the quiz level for another interrogation from Vase. But when I got there, I noticed something different. Instead of the usual goofy Ghidorah music, it was the password theme. The music change seemed to be intentional because after the first 2 questions at the start, the quiz started to take on a darker tone. Question number 1. Do you like ice cream? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 1. Do you like clowns? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 10. Is time slipping through your fingers? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 2. Do you have any regrets? Yeah. Reaction, weird face number 2. Reaction, hurt. Do some people deserve to die? No. Reaction, weird face number 3. Is it safe to go out at night? Answer, yeah. Reaction, weird face number 5. 7. Do you find it hard to sleep at night? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 9. 8. Have you ever killed anyone? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 7. 9. Do you want to kill anyone? Answer, no. Reaction, angry. 10. Are you actually accomplishing anything? No. Reaction, weird face number 4. 11. Does life have any real meaning? Answer, no. Loves it? Huh. What the? Do you like Mothra? No one likes Mothra. She sucks. Sure, she can fly, but she gets knocked back most of the time and her attacks aren't very strong. No. Too bad? Oh no. I have a bad feeling about this. Alright, going back to the actual narration, I was just doing that in character for the main protagonist of the story. And no, I don't mean Godzilla. Godzilla is just one of the player characters. I knew that last one was going to be a gameplay related question, but I had no idea what the result would be. I answered honestly because, as I said before, I never liked Mothra. Nobody liked playing as Mothra in the game, and there was a good reason for that too. Every other time that Mothra gets hit, she gets slammed back to the left corner of the screen, and she sucks at fighting because her attacks aren't very good. The only benefit that she had was being able to fly over obstacles in some levels. So, I answered no when Face replied back to me. But his expression was maniacal, and he said, "Too bad." I was taken back to the map screen. I was shocked to see that Godzilla and Anguirus had disappeared from the board, but Mothra was the only one there. Face had just fucked me over. Needless to say, I was pissed, but there wasn't anything I could do, and I'm willing to bet that even if I had said yes, I would have been stuck with Mothra anyway. Face giveth, face taketh away. I took a deep breath and got ready to explore. There were 2 paths I could take throughout the board. I decided to take the lower one. This one turned out to be a good choice for reasons I'll get to momentarily. The first one ahead of me was a forest, so I started there. Almost immediately, I got an eerie feeling. There was just something about this level that seemed off to me, even more than the last ones. Perhaps it was the pitch black background. I've always been afraid of being in a forest at night. Something about all those trees made me feel surrounded and vulnerable. about that, guys. I was just getting myself a drink. Hey, Discord. Oh, actually, speaking of Discord, and I forgot to go onto the stream on my stream. Alright, so I think I might have mentioned this last night, but there's a official NES Godzilla Creepypasta Discord. Basically, oh hey, I got a like, thank you. What's this? Damn Discord. Alright. Right. Oh. Alright, going back to the story. The fact that I was stuck as Mothra didn't help. Playing the game's previous worlds as Godzilla gave me a sense of bravery. Being in control of the king of the monsters, I'd be able to handle just about anything in my way. But it's not like that at all with Mothra. No feeling of strength or security. I'm just a weak, easily overwhelmed bug, just traversing into the unknown. Back to the level. The music had new instruments, sounding like woodwinds, followed by slow, rhythmic drums and chiming bells. It gave me this feeling that I was intruding into some dangerous area that I shouldn't be. After a while, I encountered the first enemies of the stage, but or at least I assumed they were enemies. They were strange, long-legged deer-like creatures. Instead of attacking, they were just idly walking around. I went to approach them, but they ran away. I thought about shooting one with an I-beam to see what would happen, but it just seemed wrong to me. These creatures were harmless, so I just passed over them and continued flying through the level. About halfway through, I encountered groups of the deer-like animals and two new creatures. A sloth-like creature with a beak climbing on a tree, and a hairy raptor-esque beast that were preying on the deer. It was very surreal watching these creatures interact. It didn't feel like I was playing a game, but rather than that, I was traveling through a force in another dimension. The creatures ignored me for the most part, but the raptors did attack me whenever I got too close, or if I attacked them first. I know I shot one of them to help out one of the deer creatures. I got clawed at, but confrontation was easily avoided by flying up to the top of the screen. After that, I had to choose whether I wanted to play the levels with the hourglass or the TV screen. I picked the latter, but it wasn't what I was expecting at all. When I pressed the button to start the screen, like I normally would, this screen with an animation popped up. There was also music in the background, which was the goofy Ghidorah music that used to be playing in the quiz levels. I was somewhat unsettled by this because it was just so strange. I also found it a bit spooky because I had a shirt just like that when I was a kid. After starting the animation, you could go back to the board by pressing any button. After that, I had no idea what to expect from the rest of these icons. I I went to try an hourglass level next. I was somewhat relieved when an actual level showed up. It was certainly an orthodox looking level. All brown with time measuring instruments floating in the air and gigantic grandfather clocks in the background. The music was the same as the board screen, and very early in the level I encountered something I didn't expect to see. Original enemies from the game. Hold on, guys. Alright. Not just that, it seemed to be a whole fleet of them. In the yellow tanks, which were normally immobile but could now move. Took some damage, but it wasn't anything I couldn't handle. The most interesting thing about this level was the colored hourglass icons. There were 3 of them. The blue hourglass, which made time slow and filled the level with enemies from the past. The red hourglass, which made time speed up and filled the level up with enemies from the future. And lastly, the green hourglass, which set time to normal speed and filled the level with the normal game enemies. I encountered the blue hourglass first. As stated, the game started to slow down and I saw enemies from the past, which were 5 types of prehistoric animals. I didn't know much about prehistory, but I believe all these enemies represent real animals. The level went into another segment and I encountered the green hourglass, and then I fought the original game enemies again. It was the same 5 types, so I didn't take any screenshots, but in the last segment I encountered the red hourglass, and the enemies that must have been from the future. Now, whether or not the game was showing me 8-bit renditions of creatures that will actually exist thousands of years from now, I have no idea, but with that thought in mind, I found this particular segment to be very eerie. And it was made more tense because everything moved faster. One of the enemies enemies bore a striking resemblance to something I saw in a book once called Troodon Man. Another one looked like an organic spaceship. There was only one of the fifth type of future creature, and when it appeared, all the others ran for their lives, leaving me alone to battle it. It could fly, but its sprite didn't actually move, and its single attack was firing a lightning bolt from its face. Even so, it was surprisingly powerful, and I suppose it could be considered a mini-boss. After defeating it, it left a health power-up that restored the health and energy I had lost fighting it, which was convenient. It seemed I would need all the help I can get to beat this world with Mothra alone. After that previous stage I called Time Warp, the next stage appeared to be a toxic waste dump. As you can see, the place looked grungy and inhospitable. The music was a short looping of an ambient synthesizer sound. Listening to it made me feel like I was sniffing some toxic fumes myself, and it was messing with my head the entire time. I even felt like I was choking while playing this level. The enemies all seemed to be mutated to some degree. In the above screenshot, you could see green mummies with bird skulls that jump out of the waist to spit projectiles. There's also a brownish callous skeleton monster with spider legs. Halfway through the level, I even saw one of the deer from the forest. It was alone, and when I saw it, it was drinking toxic waste out of the barrel with an eater-like tongue. I was moving over to try and make it stop, but then this flock of skull birds came out of nowhere and started attacking. The deer was scared by this and ended up running off the ground and into the toxic waste. I felt bad for it. One of the birds bit me, but I regained health quickly from killing all of them. They were rather weak. I pressed onward. Of all the levels in Entropy, this was probably the most normal, in that there was little deviance from the move around smash things formula from the original game. I encountered more creatures throughout the level, like tentacle blobs, some kind of deformed thing with human teeth. I didn't feel like provoking them into a fight, so I kept flying near the top of the screen. I still had to deal with the occasional flock of birds now and again. At the end of the level was a large bluish-green lake, and there I encountered another mini-boss, some kind of monster with a long neck and a whale skull. It attacked with a mouth projectile and by charging into you. It also could go underneath the water and rapidly emerge from a different place. It was harder to beat than the boss from the Time Warp, and it had a lot of health because it must have taken me 3 minutes to defeat it. It let out a really loud noise when it died and sank back into the water so as I left the screen. Back in the board, I went to the nearest icon I hadn't seen, which was a white tree. As I guessed, the level was a winter-themed recolor of the forest stage. But unlike the regular forest stage, I didn't feel unnerved at all playing this one. I think the music had a lot to do with it. It was a gentle, calm song. It almost sounded romantic. It was quite stress relieving, and the forest itself looked much less ominous, covered in snow. I traveled through the first segment, enjoying the atmosphere for 4 minutes, when suddenly I realized something. I haven't seen a single creature since I started the level. Where are all the animals? Soon after, I left the screen and the next segment began. In the second segment, I was still in the winter forest, but now the music was gone. I was starting to feel suspicious, but then I reminded myself that there were other empty levels in the game, and this was likely another one of those. But then I heard something familiar. It was the 12-second looping music from Unforgiving Cold starting up. I could feel my heart sink as I came across this horrible sight. It was a whole group of dead deer creatures covered in snow. Judging by the bluish black tone of their skin, they must have all frozen to death. Upon closer examination, some were even missing body parts. Now I was starting to get frightened, but I had to keep going. Before exiting the level, I was really hoping to see something resembling the previous forest animals in a living state. And sure enough, I did. It was a creature much like the beaked sloth, except this thing had white fur. It was more of a beaked gorilla. It was walking very slowly when I saw it, but I was happy to at least see something alive. But it didn't stay that way for long. A pack of raptors, who must have sensed that something else was alive, came rushing in from the right side of the screen. The beaked gorilla didn't stand a chance, as one of the raptors immediately lunged at it and ripped open its back legs. These winter raptors acted far different from their temperate relatives. While the other raptors only attacked while hunting prey or when provoked, these raptors seemed to have gone insane. They attacked everything in sight. One was running back and forth, clawing at nothing. Even the noises they made sounded different, sounding more high-pitched and enraged. As I left this second segment, I saw two raptors fighting to the death. They were both covered in injuries, and one of the raptors had even been blinded in one eye. I took a screenshot, but it didn't stay to see who won the fight. I just had to get through one more segment before I could go back to the board. But in this segment, I was no longer in the winter forest, but instead a very empty grassy plain with a bright gray moon in the sky. The pleasant music of Winter Forest Part 1 had returned. And immediately I started to feel dread. This is going to sound crazy, but it's the absolute truth. This game made this level from one of my memories. After a long stretch of nothing, I reached a lake, and then the moon moved down from the sky and began to hatch like an egg. When it did, a curled up humanoid figure fell into the lake as the moon halves dissolved quickly. I heard a splash when it hit the water, then a moment of silence. Then the stream began to shake, and a new creature emerged from the water. And thus, I was introduced to a monster I call the Moon Beast. This was the only screenshot I took, as I was focusing all my concentration on winning the fight. It was the most difficult fight yet, stronger than any of the previous bosses. This creature would have been hard to take down with Godzilla, and with Mothra it seemed nearly impossible. I suppose I would consider myself fortunate that the beast lacked any attacks like Gigan's Saw, because if it had, I would never have won this fight. I had barely 3 bars of health when I finally killed this abomination. But what happened afterward is hardly what I could call a reward. I've been trying to keep this promise and suppress this memory for years, but it seems like I have to get it off my chest. This is a very painful memory for me, but the game already knows about it, and I think you guys should too. I'll just tell you the important parts because I don't like bringing this experience back up into my head unless I have to. Back when I was in middle school, I had a girlfriend named Melissa. She suffered from some kind of mental disorder that caused her to go into episodes. When she was in an episode, she would stand or sit perfectly straight and still, and her face would instantly lose any emotion she had before. She would speak very clearly without any hint of emotion. When it was over, she would start trembling and sometimes bury her face in her hands, and remain silent for several minutes. I can't really convey the feeling it gave me in words, and I won't try. You would have to see this in person to understand. But despite this, she was a very kind person, and I cared about her dearly. We liked to hang out in a field at night and look up at the stars, but one night she didn't say anything to me at all. She just stared directly at the moon, trembling. I tried to talk to her, but she suddenly sprung up and ran right into traffic. I tried to stop her, but it was too late. She got hit by a truck and was killed that night. I looked her right in the eyes when the wheels went over her neck. That sight has always haunted me. I know that the game knows about this, because after I defeated the Moon Beast, this happened. I won't be able to show anything, but I'll let y'all know what it is. So the first screenshot is just Melissa in red letters. Melissa, kill yourself. And then from this point on, it shows kill repeatedly on screen. Kill, 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 kill. That noise was just me being a weirdo, but the final screenshot is a face that might look familiar. It's the main antagonist. Anyway, going on to part 2 of Entropy. After that, the game went back to the board screen. It was all I could do not to burst out screaming. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely hold the controller. I knew the game was going to test me if I kept playing, but I had no idea it would go so far. Or that it was even capable of doing what it just did. I could feel my brain going haywire as I asked myself, did the game just read my mind? That didn't seem possible, but what other explanation was there? It was then that I could no longer deny what now seemed obvious. This game is alive, and not only that, it also can establish some kind of mental connection with the player. And yet, I couldn't convince myself to stop playing. I don't know if it was the game messing with my mind or just my stubborn curiosity, but even with the previous revelation, I wanted to see this through to the end, even more than I did before I beat dementia. Terrifying as it might be, dangerous even, I knew that if I quit playing, I would never be able to stop thinking about it. If I tried to restart the game, it might go back to being a normal game. How many people ever get to witness something like this firsthand, let alone be able to take screenshots of the entire thing? fucked up as this was the experience of a lifetime. But even so, I couldn't take any chances with my health. I had the TV remote right next to me, ready to turn the TV off in case I felt I was in actual danger. And if that didn't work, I would pull the plug out of the wall and just run out of the room. Surely that would be enough. Whatever powers the game has, it seemed to be confined to what it can show on the TV and whatever its mental connection could do. The latter was what worried me. I still didn't know what I was dealing with, so I wasn't about to underestimate it. I took a break for a few minutes to calm my nerves, and then I was back to the game. And speaking of TVs, there was a TV screen icon right below the white forest I had just left. Because the first animation was so bizarre, I figured I'd try another to see what happens. Although I expected the same animation, I actually got something different. It's a animated picture of the Frogman thing. Weird. The music for this was the Neptune board music. Fitting, I suppose, since it's a fishman and all, but I can't help but wonder what the point of these things are. There was one other TV icon, so I figured it must have a unique animation of its own. I was going to make sure to see what it was before I left Entropy, but then it was time for another level. The gold brick icon was the closest thing, so I went to that. And I started up in a gold labyrinth level. My health and power were refilled. Not sure how or why, but I was glad not to be heading into the unknown, nearly dead. I also noticed that my Mothra sprite had shrunk down to half its size. The music was a slow, ominous drum beat with female vocals kicking in about a minute into it. Quite haunting. The gold labyrinth itself was an anomaly. I'm not sure how this level would have been played if I was using Godzilla or Anguirus, because flying seemed necessary just to get through this place. Another thing that caught my attention was that when you went left, your monster actually turns and faces the left. That sounds stupidly obvious, but in the original game you were only supposed to face right, so when you tried to move left, your monster would walk or fly backwards. The level is apparently gigantic in size, because every time I thought I had reached an end to it, I found out that I was going, or thought I was going back to where I started. I encountered something totally new. Things like lava blockades, new enemies, and statue faces. And I found one statue face at a dead end with a wide, open-eyed stare. The night Melissa died, she had an expression on her face that looked exactly like this. Even when she got hit by the truck, she still had that same expression. I can't help but feel like something really is staring at me from behind this screen when I look at this. I really didn't want to be reminded of that night anymore, so I left the statue almost as soon as I found it. I needed to find the exit anyway, which proved to be no simple task. It felt like this level stretched on forever in all directions. I must have wandered around the level for at least 15 minutes before I finally saw something. It was a creature that wasn't golden, seemingly the only one of its kind in this level. Lacking any kind of hover ability like the other monsters, it just walked back and forth on the platform. But it wasn't long after I found it that a flying machine swooped in and grabbed it, and then flew off with it. The machine had apparently not seen me, so I decided to follow it, to see where it was taking the creature. The machine stopped at a room with a large cauldron-like object in the center. The machine hovered over the cauldron and dropped the creature into it. The creature emerged from a hole in the cauldron's side, now adorned in the same gold as everything else. The machine flew off. I'm not really sure what to make of this, but I'm glad I came across it because I found the exit soon after. When I got back to the board, I realized that the bosses hadn't moved at all. A bit odd, but it didn't bother me. It actually made planning my route through Entropy easier. There were still 2 new icons to explore. The Indigo Cliffs and a black version of the Labyrinth. Since there were only 3 black Labyrinth icons, which were surrounded by bosses, I played the Indigo Cliffs first. It was a lot like the blue/green mountains. The level graphics had the same shredded look to it. There's also a recolor of the clouds and moon from the toxic waste dump. The music, if you could call it that, was merely a deep rumbling sound. One of the first things I encountered were these multicolored creatures with big heads emerging from a small hole in the cave, or a small cave in the ground. They all made a synchronized shaking sound, and they were walking to the right in a group after emerging from the hole, the cave, ignoring me. Having no other way to go, I followed them on their route. More and more emerged from the cave, until the group had about 100 creatures. Eventually, the pathway ended in a cliff. I was shocked to see that upon reaching the cliff, the creatures began jumping into the abyss. I've seen enemies walk off cliffs before, but I've never seen NPCs commit mass suicide like this. Very unsettling way to start off a level. I continued on, flying over various strange animals like the ones shown here. Another group of multicolored bobbleheads was jumping up and down, only to be snatched up by large birds, which are fairly similar, are sprite versions of the giant condor from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. I defeated some of the condors in battle, but it bothered me that these bobbleheads seemed so eager to die. If the game itself is alive, maybe the creatures in these levels were also alive? And maybe some just have some very unhappy lives if this behavior was any indication. But what provokes them to do this? In the back of my mind, I almost suspect that the glowing moon in the sky was the reason. At the end of the level, I saw yet another group of bobbleheads marching up to a large monster and being devoured. This was starting to disgust me, so acting on impulse, I fired off eye beams at both the monster and the bobbleheads. I destroyed the cave. The monster became angry and ran through the remaining bobbleheads to fight me. Although it lacked any ranged attacks, it was relentless, but it was no match for me. I was in the home stretch now, up to the bosses. My plan was to go through Batra first, and then Megalon. After that, I would watch the last TV screen, play the Black Labyrinth before fighting Godzilla, and lastly, going through the chase with the Hell Beast. I was curious to see if it would be in a new form again. But first things first, time to beat up Batra. As expected, he started off in his larval form. The music was Baron's battle theme. Whenever the music puts in a new Godzilla kaiju with more than one form, that other form always shows up. For a game that's otherwise inexplicable, it's rather startling in its consistency and accuracy to the new kaiju bosses. The fight started off simple. Larva Batra fought in a similar fashion as Magma did, charging back and forth and occasionally firing off lightning from his horn. I swear I'm not tired. During the fight, I noticed that Mothra's combat capabilities had been altered in my favor. The I-beams did twice as much damage as they originally did, and now were as strong as Godzilla's punches. The poison powder was similarly improved. It also did this nice thing where it would actually hit an enemy when you used it. In the original game, even though Mothra could fly, she was unable to fly over an opponent. You would get knocked back the same way as if you just ran straight into them. Which was extremely annoying, but not anymore. I could change direction and fly around, which was a big help because fighting Imago Batra was like fighting a clone Mothra. Though Batra is distinctly faster and stronger, no longer impeded by its slow-moving larval form, Imago Batra was a fearsome opponent. Although it lacked the horn lightning, it now had a new, more powerful I-beam. Batra changed direction just like I could, so this battle involved a lot of flipping and flying around. It was pretty damned fun, to be honest. After defeating Batra, I was excited to see what Megalon would be, but first I went through an Indigo Cliffs level and shot through a bunch of the creatures for the health power-ups. So about Megalon. His music was Gigan's theme. Makes sense since Gigan was his battle partner and Megalon's one and so far only film appearance. It was a lot like Mothra, but faster and with more weapons. He'd start off charging off with his drills. I liked to fly back and forth around him, which seemed to really annoy him. After a few seconds, he'd step back, turn around, and start spitting out grenades. Those were a pain because they bounced whenever they hit the ground. Lastly, he'd started spamming his lightning beam, which only went straight forward, so it was easy to duck under and then shoot him with I-beams. Overall, I'd describe him as strong, persistent, but dumb. I was now nearing the end of Entropy. I'd just taken down Megalon, and I started up the last TV screen. See where we get this time. The result wasn't pleasant. The music for this gruesome scene was the password theme. By the way, the thing in question was a animated image of a person hitting a constrained person with a hammer or an axe or something in the face, by the way. I couldn't figure out why this animation was so sinister and violent in comparison to the other two. The whole game seemed to be growing more malevolent. As I went on to finish Entropy, I began to feel drained. It's hard to describe, like I just suddenly became tired when I wasn't before. It's most likely because of all the tension from all that happened in this game getting to me. Who knows? The last level type from Entropy is what I would like to call the Shadow Maze, or Shadow Labyrinth. The scenery was recolored from gold to black. The music was an evil ambiance, similar to Unforgiven Cold, but distinctly different. The music was my first sign that this level was going to be distressing. I traveled through the maze for about a minute, and I noticed there weren't any creatures hovering around. It was an odd transition from the Gold Labyrinth, which was overrun with creatures, to this level which had nothing at all. But then this might be a good thing, because there wouldn't be any obstacles and I could get through this level with ease. And then the screen went black. I immediately snapped out of my daze from a few seconds earlier. Everything had been darkened so that the only thing I could see was the monster sprite. I couldn't tell where I was going, and I ended up frantically running into walls. I heard a noise. The sound of a crowd running through a hallway. Along with the running came the roars. Loud roaring sounds, which I would describe as something like a rabid dog the size of an elephant, screaming with fury. I could tell that whatever was making this noise, there were lots of them. I knew there was something there, but it wasn't until I did some screen cap editing that I got to see what my pursuers looked like. But at the time, I didn't see where they were, or even what was going on. I was literally running blind, and this mob of beasts eventually caught up with me. All I could think was, "No!" as I saw my life bar rapidly declining. The monsters had taken me down to half my total health. When I was saved, the light came back on, and the attackers had disappeared. So the challenge of this level is revealed. Find the exit before the lights go out, and a pack of monsters maul you to death. I was in panic mode now, moving as fast as I could while trying every path I could find for a way out. As I played through the level, the lights went out a total of 3 times. The second time, I would have been dead meat had it not been for one of the wide-eyed statues. As I stayed close to it, the monsters all seemed to avoid me until the light came back. The statue warded them off somehow. I was safe as long as I stayed near the statue, but at the same time I had to leave and go find the exit. The Shadow Labyrinth turned out to be much smaller than the Gold Labyrinth, as it only took about 6 minutes to navigate to the end. But before the end, there was a row of halls leading straight down, with no way out once you entered. You either got to the exit before the monsters reached you, or you died. Luckily, I made it out. One more boss, Godzilla. I started the battle and got something unexpected. Not only did my life shoot back up to 100, it seems to do that randomly, but instead of a replacement, I was fighting Godzilla. But any Godzilla fan worth their salt can figure this out. Godzilla started off fighting a clone Godzilla, but its disguise burned away after only 3 life bars. Usually, a transformation only occurred at the halfway point. At this point, it was like fighting Godzilla in the normal game. Felt kinda nice to fight one of the original game enemies for a change. Although he wasn't exactly like normal. He also had a rainbow beam and a trigger and finger missiles. This prevented me from doing the old trick of backing him into a corner and hitting him with eye beams in a spot where he couldn't hit me, but that was a cheap trick anyway. But after getting him down to have his health, something weird started to happen. His sprite started to glitch in much the same way as Godzilla did way back in the first world. After a few seconds, the glitches began to form a new shape. And thus, the game had created not Mecha Godzilla. And I discovered that this visual glitch was somehow related to the game recreating things. The human face on this one gives it a very uncanny look. It was one of the stronger replacement monsters and had the most firepower. Pictured here is its mouth beam, which I got caught in the middle of. Even though it was a bit stronger, it was also slower than its original counterpart and couldn't jump around as much. I won the fight by constantly staying out of its line of fire, bombarding the machine with poison powder as I flew over it. One last thing to do, the Hellbeast chase. Oh boy, might as well get this over with, I thought. The Entropy chase level ended up being exactly what I was afraid of. A labyrinth level. All the other chase levels, although difficult, were extremely straightforward. You just had to run to the right and not get touched. But this took all of the simplicity out of it. There was no telling how big this labyrinth would be, or where the exit was. And now, not only did I have to constantly backtrack to find my way, I also had to avoid getting one-hit killed by the red monster. For those first 30 seconds, it didn't show up, but I knew it would. And as I started to pick up the pace, I heard a loud flapping sound. There it was, in a flying form. It flew with bat-like wings and was as fast and relentless as ever. For reasons already stated, this was probably the most nerve-wracking of all chases, and as such I had to keep my focus on the game and not taking screen caps. I did, however, take one of the monster doing something I found very interesting. I managed to lose it by going through a different path than it apparently expected, and it was blocked off from attacking me by one of the organic walls of the red labyrinth. Or so I thought. It clung through the wall for a second, before opening its mouth and tearing the wall apart with its intestine jaws. But those brief milliseconds the monster was held back might have been the key to me finding the exit. The path to exit was long and complex, but from what I remember, I went up and back towards the left. I'm not exactly sure why I chose that particular way. Just a lucky hunch, I suppose. I was sweating profusely, but my luck had saved me yet again. I hoped that it wouldn't run out before I had finished the game. There were only two worlds left to go through. The next one was the penultimate world, called Extus. Alright, I know this stream was a lot shorter than last night's, but I'm going to do Extus tomorrow night. And as for the one after that, I'm probably going to do that on my final work day for the weekend. Like, once I find out my work schedule. And, yeah. stay tuned for tomorrow night for, I might just do Exodus, or I might do both Exodus and the final world after that, and maybe the finale if I'm able to, because I know I won't have to cook anything tomorrow night, so I'm obviously not going to be as busy, but even still, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you did, then please like, comment, and subscribe, as well as turn on notifications and let your friends know about this channel so that way they can check it out. And yeah, that'll be it. I'll see you guys tomorrow night for another part to my redo of the NES Godzilla Creepypasta narration from yours truly, Rex. I will see you guys then.